You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we've got breaking news here as it relates to this ongoing saga as to whether or not Donald Trump has the ability to deploy his troops into different states. New update here in Portland. Can you explain what just happened in court?
Yeah, Brian, a big development. Right now, the full Court of Appeals, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is overseeing the Portland, Oregon case, whether Donald Trump is going to get to put soldiers on the streets of Portland, that panel just put a hold, a temporary stop, a stay on Donald Trump's ability to put soldiers into the streets of Portland, Oregon. So this is a good development, but I have to warn our viewers, it's a temporary development. So let's do a little bit of the backstory. So first of all, there was a Trump-appointed judge named Karen Immergut who held a hearing and issued a restraining order saying, no, Donald Trump cannot federalize the Oregon State National Guard and deploy those soldiers to the streets of Portland. Why? Because she said there's no factual basis. Portland is not war-ravaged. There aren't, wild renegade Antifa troops that have taken over Portland. And in fact, she said something that I think should come to define the Trump presidency. She said Donald Trump's assertions are, quote, untethered to the facts, close quote. So she put a stop to it. She issued a restraining order. Well, Donald Trump, not surprisingly, ran up to the Court of Appeals, and a 3-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that, you know what, we don't care what Judge Immergut said about the state of play, the facts on, the streets of Portland, Oregon. We're just going to defer to Donald Trump. He's entitled to great deference, and if he says it's war-torn, it's war-torn. Of course it's not, because there was no evidence to support that. Importantly, Brian, the 3-judge panel that entered that finding overturning Judge Immergut's restraining order, it was 2 Trump appointees, and those are the only 2 who voted to defer to Donald Trump and let him put soldiers on the streets of Portland. And what we just got was once the state, the Attorney General for the state of Oregon, asked the full appeals court, not just those 2 Trump-appointed judges who sit on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the full bench, en banc, to review this, horrific decision. And what the administrator, the senior judge who's in charge of these en banc reviews, assessing whether they're going to be granted or not, that judge just said, okay, hang on. We are going to stay. We're going to put a temporary stop to that 2 Trump-appointed judge panel's opinion saying Trump can send in the troops. So the state of play right now is the Trump administration at this moment cannot put troops on the streets of Portland, federalized state National Guard troops, while the appeals court decides if they want to take up, the full bench, all of the judges on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal want to take up the issue. It looks like this is a suggestion that they might want to take it up, but they haven't decided that yet. So let me put this in terms that maybe can bring it to life. I feel like what we're watching, Brian, is a tennis match, a high-stakes tennis match where you got a trial court judge on one side, you've got appeals court judges on the other side. Think of the tennis ball as Trump's big ball of abuse, of governmental power, and it's being batted back and forth across the net, and we are all here left to wonder who the hell is going to win the point. The American people, the safety of the people of the state of Oregon and the city of Portland, or is Trump's abuse of power going to win the point? This is a dangerous, high-stakes tennis game that's being played.
So that's what's happening right now in Portland. The latest news we have is good news. It's that the ability for Donald Trump to be able to deploy these troops has been blocked, temporarily at least, by the judges on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Can you give a broader state of play in terms of where Trump's troop deployments lie in the other places he's tried to do this?
Yeah, there is a lot going on militarily, particularly if Donald Trump has his way all across the country, because we've had similar litigation that has unfolded in Chicago, in Illinois, with Donald Trump wanting to deploy soldiers to the streets of Chicago. And fortunately there, the news is even better, because both a trial court judge said, no, you can't do it. And in fact, that trial court judge, April Perry, said Donald Trump is adding fuel to a fire he started. Well, that one went up to a court of appeals too, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. Because that's Illinois, it's a different federal circuit court of appeals. And guess what? All three judges, including one appointed by Donald Trump, said, no, that is a sound ruling from the trial court prohibiting Donald Trump from putting soldiers on the streets of Chicago. So Donald Trump tried to run up to where? His favorite court of appeals, the Supreme Court, and we are waiting to see what the Supreme Court will do. They haven't even accepted the case for review yet, so that's what we're waiting to see. So, Brian, if we move out to California, remember when Donald Trump put troops on the streets of L.A., that was attacked. There was a temporary restraining order issued. That went up on appeal. It got reversed. All of that is water under the legal bridge because that's no longer in play. Here's what is in play in California. Judge Charles Breyer, after the temporary restraining issue was behind him, he held a hearing on the merits, actually the meat of the issue, with the issue being, did Donald Trump have the lawful and constitutional authority to put soldiers on the streets of L.A.? And Charles Breyer ruled, no, he did not. That has been appealed, and that is still sitting at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. So that we are in a holding pattern on. And what's the latest? Well, you had Donald Trump threaten to put soldiers on the streets of San Francisco, and he backed down, at least for the moment. He's also threatening to do it in Memphis. So listen, this is Donald Trump attempting to abuse presidential power writ large. This is Donald Trump trying to intimidate everybody nationwide. But the good news is, even though there are fits and starts and that tennis ball of abuse keeps getting batted back and forth over the net, at this moment, the courts continue to hold strong. But the flip side of that coin, Brian, is Donald Trump continues to try to abuse his presidential power.
And just a quick aside, for those who are watching right now, if you want to stay on top of this kind of legal news and any other legal news, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. It's 100% free, but it's a great way to support our work. Glenn, to what extent is all of this, whether we're looking at the trial courts or the appeals courts in California or Oregon or Chicago, to what extent is all of this just academic, considering the fact that once this thing gets up to the Supreme Court, that's really where Trump wants it anyway. And so we can applaud these appeals courts wins or these trials courts wins. We can condemn the losses or where these Trump appointed judges side with Trump. But at the end of the day, aren't these just all temporary victories or losses, given the fact that we're waiting for the Supreme Court to be the ultimate arbiter of what Trump can or can't do here?
It is all academic, but you know what? If we continue along with the academic exercise, guess what? Trial court judges and courts of appeal are writing term papers. They're taking final exams, and they are solidifying what the law tells us about what Donald Trump is trying to do. And by and large, those exams they're taking and those term papers they are authoring with their legal opinions announce that what Donald Trump is trying to do has no basis in fact, it is not supported in the law, and it often violates the Constitution. So yes, it's an academic exercise, but these academics are important. Now, the flip side of that coin is once it's up at the Supreme Court, what could the Supreme Court do, as it has been doing regularly, including on the shadow docket? So it doesn't even tell us or the lower court judges why they're doing it. They basically say, to hell with all those trial court and appeals court judges and all the term papers they wrote and all the final exams they presented analyzing the facts, the law, and the Constitution. We're just going to let Donald Trump run wild, unfettered presidential power, complete deference to whatever he says. So if he says Martians have landed and are invading Portland, Oregon, and therefore I need to send the troops in, hey, he's the president, and when you're the president, you get to do it.
Glenn, final question here as it relates to the Supreme Court. Is there any indication, anything you can read from the tea leaves that might suggest how this court, this 6-3 conservative court, may rule on this issue of troop deployments?
I think we have to look to their determination to let Donald Trump expand presidential power. And here's the thing, Brian, in the first instance, even when we're not living in the legal upside down, presidential power is often at its zenith when you're talking about things like national security concerns. You know, not necessarily declarations of war, because as we know, the Constitution empowers Congress to declare war, not the President of the United States. That feels like a technicality that has largely been ignored. I think the last two times Congress declared war was World War I and World War II, if I'm not mistaken. So we have seen Donald Trump take advantage of the vacuum that is Congress. Hell, they won't even come back into session for fear that the Epstein files might be disclosed, might be revealed to the public. So here we are amidst the government shutdown, and MAGA Mike Johnson seems content to, let the food lines grow longer all across America as long as he continues to protect dear leader. But generally, the courts have held that presidential power is at its zenith, its highest point, and a president is entitled to great deference when we're talking about national security issues. So if I had to bet, I hate to do this, Brian, I would probably put 90 cents of my max $1 bet on the Supreme Court allowing Donald Trump to do what he damn well pleases when it comes to federalizing state national guards and putting them on the streets of really any city, any town, any state that Donald Trump decides is under attack from hostile forces.
Well, the reality is that we will have an answer to that question likely very soon as this issue continues to boil up out of the trial courts into the appeals courts and out of the appeals courts and up to the Supreme Court. So for those who are watching, if you want to stay on top of this issue, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. Best way to support our work. It is 100% free, and it's a great way to support independent media. I'm Brian Teller Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.